Welcome to the Cinema Recaps. Today we are review a horror and thriller movie, Hostel, released in 2005. Watch out and take care, spoilers ahead. In Amsterdam, American backpackers Paxton and Josh, and Icelander Ollie, meet Alexei, a Russian man who tells them approximately a Slovak hostel full of American-loving nearby ladies. The backpackers board a educate to Slovakia, where they meet a Dutch businessman, long enough to be unnerved through his weird conduct. Upon arriving within the small village, the backpackers test into the neighborhood hostel and find themselves sharing a room with Natalia and Svetlana, two appealing, single ladies who entice the backpackers to a spa, wherein the ladies anticipate nude in a sauna. They invite the guys to a disco that night time and dance and drink with them for a few hours. Josh himself is uneasy approximately hooking up with either of them in view that he'd lately long gone through a terrible breakup. He leaves the membership for a few minutes and is unexpectedly accosted by way of a small institution of children who demand gum and sweet. The Dutch businessman appears and gives the youngsters money and sharply orders them to depart. Josh is grateful and gives to shop for him a drink in the membership. Later, Natalia and Svetlana take Josh and Paxton lower back to their room and feature sex with them. The next morning, Ollie appears to be missing. A younger Japanese backpacker named Kana additionally reviews that her pal Yuki has also disappeared. An MMS photo sent from Yuki's smartphone suggests Yuki and Ollie beneath a smokestack of an abandoned manufacturing unit, with the word sayonara written underneath it. Unbeknownst to Josh and Paxton, Ollie has been decapitated and Yuki tortured, and, possibly, killed. A atypical, hulking man taking the image and sending it with Ollie's telephone. Paxton and Josh determined to depart Bratislava with Kana tomorrow. Later that night time, at the same time as partying with Natalia and Svetlana, Paxton and Josh succumb to the consequences of alcohol. Josh stumbles back to the hostel and is put in his bed by the female concierge. After a few seconds, an unidentified person enters the room. Paxton passes out in the disco's garage room, mistaking it for the guys' room. Hours later, Josh wakes up handcuffed to a chair in a dungeon-like room surrounded with the aid of power tools and guns. The Dutch businessman enters in a leather-based apron and gloves and starts off torturing Josh, drilling him in his percent simply above his nipples and several spots in his thighs, regardless of Josh's screams of ache and his begging to be allowed cross. After he is finished, the Dutch business guy sits down and talks to Josh, explaining his unfulfilled goals of being a healthcare provider because of his trembling hands. Josh begs to be launched. The businessman then cuts Josh's Achilles tendon. Josh tries to walk and collapses. His torturer could him move slowly toward the door earlier than sooner or later grabbing him, dragging him before a scummy replicate and slashing his throat with a scalpel. Across city, Paxton awakens and returns to the hostel to discover both Josh and Kana lacking. In his room are a one-of-a-kind pair of beautiful women inviting him to a spa, eerily just like Natalia's and Svetlana's provide from earlier then. When the neighborhood police chief proves unhelpful, Paxton locates Natalia and Svetlana at an difficult-to-understand bar and needs to be taken to an art show in which he thinks his buddies are. They forced to a factory at the outskirts of the metropolis. Natalia's demeanor has changed from friendly to aloof and unsociable. She mocks him a piece for being an American traveler. She leads him internal and down an eerie hall in which, in a grimy mobile-like room, Paxton sees the Dutch businessman slicing up Josh's lifeless body. Horrified, he berates Natalia, who laughs at him, telling him they pay her to entice tourists to the manufacturing facility. He is ambushed by thugs who drag him beyond cells packed with other backpackers being tortured by means of various clients. Paxton is taken to his own mobile and handcuffed to a chair, joined minutes later by means of a German customer, who tortures him, first using a gardening claw after which pointing a gun at him to frighten him. Distracted through Paxton's capability to plead for his existence in German, the purchaser calls in one of the factory's hulking guards to position a ball gag in Pax's mouth and tries to kill him with a chainsaw. However, earlier than he can start, Paxton starts off vomiting, either out of fear or because the gag becomes choking him. Due to his ball gag, he begins to choke on his personal vomit, and the purchaser fast removes the ball gag, possibly to prevent Paxton's death before he should kill him. He then tactics Pax once more with the chainsaw, however inadvertently saws off Paxton's ring and pinky finger before slipping at the ball gag which he simply threw at the floor. The purchaser drops the chainsaw on his personal leg and severs it. With his arms severed, Paxton is able to slip his hand from the cuff, grabs the purchaser's pistol and shoots the person dead. When the shield comes to test at the situation, Paxton, having lower back to his original sitting position and appearing unconscious, shoots and kills the defend. He grabs his fingers, disguises himself with a torturer's apron, and dons a metal mask earlier than slipping out into the corridor. He hides in a nearby room to avoid sees from other guards, in which he reveals a group of victims. He hides beneath a pile of body parts on a cart before he's taken to a room where he sees lifeless bodies being chopped up by way of a hulking, silent butcher. One of the corpses is Josh's. The butcher additionally loots the victims for valuables and piles the body elements right into a tray to toss them into a huge cremation oven. Paxton kills the butcher with a hammer and escapes to the floor, where he then friends outdoor to peer cops conspiring with the factory men. Paxton slips into a locker room and dresses himself in the garments of a client, pulling a glove over his mutilated hand, and discovers a business card for elite hunting. Now revealed as a secret, worldwide, murder-for-profit business enterprise that expenses ascending costs for Slovakians, Europeans, and maximum of taken with Americans, who carry a price of $25,000 for the possibility to torture them. A particularly crazed American businessman arrives and, believing Paxton to be some other client, discusses his intended sufferer and asks Paxton whether or not to kill her speedy or slowly. Paxton advises administering a brief demise. However, the American businessman disagrees and decides to lodge to torturing her, leaving at the back of a no longer needed firearm earlier than exiting. Paxton steals the pistol and escapes to the courtyard whilst he hears a girl scream. Unable to ignore it, he returns to the factory and kills the American, now inside the center of mutilating Kana's face and getting ready to burn her with a blowtorch. Kana's right eye is striking out of her injured face. Paxton cuts it off and that they run out of doors. Paxton and Kana thieve a vehicle and head to the railway station, spotting Alexei, Natalia and Svetlana on their way from the original hostel. Paxton vengefully runs them over, killing Svetlana and Alexei. Natalia survives the preliminary collision, however is administered over by means of Pax and Kana's pursuers. Pax sees the gang of children and notices that he's within the identical car that he became driven into the artwork display, which has a bag of sweet in it. The gang then kills the humans chasing Paxton, having been bribed with the bag of sweet. At the railway station, Kana notices the disfigured mirrored image of her missing eye and her tortured face, and, unable to live together with her hideous scars, throws herself into the course of an incoming train, distracting the guards and allowing Paxton to break out aboard every other educate. Once aboard, Paxton hears the acquainted voice of Josh's torturer, the Dutch businessman. As the train stops in Vienna, Austria, Paxton slyly follows him to a public restroom and throws the elite hunting's card underneath his stall. When the Dutch businessman reaches right down to pick it up, Paxton grabs his hand and, the usage of a scalpel, cuts off the identical arms he misplaced throughout his breakout. He then breaks into the stall and nearly drowns the Dutch businessman inside the lavatory bowl, permitting time for him to apprehend Paxton earlier than slitting his throat, killing him. Paxton then leaves to board any other teach out of Austria. Thanks for watching.